Honestly, I'm just trying to recoup my losses. It's only fair. That was the first thing she said, standing in the middle of my kitchen, sunlight glinting off the brand new faucet I'd just installed. The casual entitlement in her voice, the way she swept a dismissive gaze over my meticulously organized spice rack, was a familiar ache. It was a Tuesday, just like any other Tuesday before the world tilted slightly off its axis. My normal. My carefully constructed equilibrium, built on a foundation of, well, a lot of swallowing. My parents. They'd always been a force of nature, a tornado of needs and expectations. My mother, a woman who believed the world owed her a constant standing ovation, and my father, a gentle enabler who'd long ago surrendered to her whims. Growing up, their house was a monument to her desires. The sprawling backyard, the center of which was a meticulously maintained swimming pool, was her personal kingdom. It was the jewel in the crown, the reason neighbors flocked, the symbol of their supposed success. It was also, as I'd slowly come to understand, a drain. Not just financially, though that was a significant part of it, but emotionally. It demanded constant upkeep, constant attention, constant justification for its existence. And the justification always, somehow, circled back to my mother. She'd spent years cultivating the image of the generous hostess, the matriarch with the enviable lifestyle. The pool was the centerpiece of that performance. Every summer, it was the backdrop for lavish barbecues, impromptu family gatherings that always seemed to revolve around her spotlight, and countless hours she spent sunning herself, radiating an aura of effortless luxury that was, in reality, meticulously curated and aggressively defended. I learned early on to navigate the currents of their personalities. My role was often the quiet observer, the dutiful child who never quite met the impossibly high bar of their approval, but who always picked up the slack. I'd spent my childhood picking up pool toys, my teenage years meticulously cleaning the filters when the hired help forgot, and my early adulthood fielding the passive-aggressive comments about how unfortunate it was that I didn't have a place quite like this. Their pronouncements were rarely direct accusations, but veiled criticisms designed to chip away at any sense of independent accomplishment I might dare to foster. There was the time, years ago, when I'd saved up for a modest down payment on my first apartment. I'd been so proud, so excited to finally have my own little corner of the world. My mother, during a visit, had casually mentioned how expensive it must be to maintain a pool. Then, with a sigh that could curdle milk, she'd added, "It's such a shame some people don't appreciate the value of a good investment. We pour so much into this place, you know. It's not cheap to keep this oasis going." The implication was clear: my apartment was a frivolous expense, a waste of potential resources that should have, been directed towards their ever-present financial needs, which inevitably centered around the upkeep of that gleaming blue rectangle. Then there was the incident with the new patio furniture. They'd decided, on a whim, that the old set was tired and déclassé. The bill for the new, high-end wicker furniture was astronomical. I'd happened to be visiting when the delivery truck arrived. My mother, beaming, had gestured to the gleaming set. "Isn't it divine? Your father insisted we get the best." Though, she'd trailed off, her eyes landing on me, "It does make you wonder how people manage with less. The sheer of maintaining a certain standard, isn't it a burden?" I was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, having just helped my father move a heavy box. The unspoken comparison, the deliberate highlighting of their perceived hardship while I was clearly making do, stung more than any direct insult. It was the constant subtle erosion of my self-worth, the implicit judgment that my life was somehow lesser because it didn't involve a sprawling backyard and a constant stream of expensive maintenance. And the pool itself, it was more than just a body of water. It was a status symbol, a tool for social currency, and, in my mother's hands, a weapon. It was the reason for her annual summer party, the event that dominated her social calendar for weeks. The year I'd been diagnosed with a chronic illness, a flare-up had landed me in bed for nearly a month. The party was that weekend. I'd called my mother, my voice weak, to let her know I wouldn't be able to make it. There was a beat of silence, then a sigh. "Oh, that's a shame. We've invited everyone. It's going to be such a lovely turnout this year. You can't just rest up a bit before?" It's just such a shame for the pool to be underused. The emphasis, the thinly veiled disappointment that my illness was inconveniencing her social schedule, was a hard slap. My health was secondary to her social obligations. The incident itself wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow, agonizing implosion. It had been a sweltering August afternoon. The kind of heat that presses down on you, making the air thick and heavy. I'd been at their house for a mandatory Sunday dinner. The kind where the conversation is a tightrope walk, each word chosen to avoid the inevitable precipice of conflict. My mother had been particularly animated, regaling the table with tales of her bridge club and their latest vacation plans. My father, as usual, sat quietly, nodding along. The pool, pristine and shimmering, was visible through the sliding glass doors. Suddenly, my mother paused mid-sentence. She turned her gaze towards me, a glint in her eye that was more predatory than maternal. "You know," she began, her voice pitched just right to sound conversational, but with an undercurrent of steel, "this pool has been such a significant expense over the years. Between the chemicals, the repairs, the heating, it adds up. And frankly, it's mostly been used by us, and the occasional guest. But it's a beautiful amenity. And since you're so, I was thinking we should explore options for offsetting some of these costs." My fork clattered against my plate. My father looked up, a flicker of confusion on his face. "Offsetting costs?" I managed to ask, my throat suddenly tight. My mother leaned forward, her smile widening, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yes. You see, the property taxes are quite substantial, and a lot of that is due to the value this pool adds. And your father and I, well, we're not getting any younger. We think it's time to be more practical. So, we've decided that going forward, there will be a usage fee. For anyone who isn't a primary resident, of course." She paused, letting the words sink in, her gaze fixed on me. "And since you're here so often, and you do enjoy it, we've calculated it out. Based on average usage and the property tax allocation, it's going to be a modest fee per visit. To ensure we can continue to maintain this." The air in the dining room seemed to compress. The hum of the air conditioner became deafening. My father, finally sensing the tension, cleared his throat. "Now, dear, I'm not sure that's entirely necessary." My mother waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be silly, Arthur. It's just business. And we need to be sensible. Especially now, with everything going on." The "everything going on" was a vague reference to a recent market downturn that had affected her stock portfolio, a common refrain when she felt the need to justify any perceived financial strain. My stomach churned. Per visit? A usage fee? For my parents' pool? The same pool I'd spent countless hours cleaning, maintaining, and even discreetly paying for repairs when they'd conveniently forgotten to budget for them. The same pool that was the symbol of their supposed generosity, their enviable lifestyle, a lifestyle that had always felt just out of reach for me, despite my own hard work. I looked at my mother. Her face was a mask of sweet reasonableness, but her eyes held a triumphant spark. She knew. She knew exactly what she was doing. It wasn't about recouping losses, it was about control. It was about asserting her dominion, about reminding me of my place, about extracting a pound of flesh for every perceived slight, every independent step I'd taken. The sheer audacity, the calculated cruelty of it, was breathtaking. They were charging me to use pool, a privilege they'd always presented as a given, a birthright of being their child. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. The betrayal, though sharp, was also oddly clarifying. It was the culmination of a lifetime of subtle manipulations, of veiled criticisms, of emotional blackmails. And in that moment, surrounded by the opulent trappings of their manufactured perfect life, I saw it all with stark clarity. The entitlement, the greed masquerading as practicality, the casual disregard for my feelings. I calmly pushed my plate away. "I understand," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the seismic shift happening within me. I met my mother's gaze, and for the first time I didn't flinch. "I appreciate you making that clear." I stood up. "I think I'll head home now. It's a long drive, and I have an early start tomorrow. My mother blinked, momentarily thrown by my lack of protest. Oh. All right then. Don't forget, the fee starts next time. She smiled, a little too brightly. I simply nodded. I won't forget. The drive home was silent, but my mind was racing. Not with anger, but with a cold, quiet determination. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a remarkably clear landscape. The damage had been done, the final straw had fallen, and it was time for me to execute my own quiet renovation. For the next few weeks, I didn't visit. My phone remained silent. My mother, accustomed to my constant availability, sent a few probing texts, every thing okay? Haven't seen you. Wondering if you're feeling better? I responded with brief, polite assurances, offering no explanation. The bridge club, the summer parties, the casual drop-ins, they were all part of her carefully constructed ecosystem, and I was no longer a willing participant. Then, I made the calls. I contacted a few professionals, not for repairs, but for a different kind of service. I researched local regulations, property laws, and meticulously gathered documentation. I reviewed old emails, saved voicemails, and compiled a detailed ledger of every expense I'd ever incurred for their property, the new pool pump I'd paid for out of my own pocket after a hiccup, the countless hours I'd spent patching liners, the filters I'd replaced, the landscaping I'd done that had magically appeared. I even included the market value of my time, based on my professional hourly rate, for all the favors I'd performed. Finally, I drafted a formal document. It wasn't an accusation, not an ultimatum. It was a cold, factual accounting. A meticulous breakdown of my financial contributions to their property, presented not as a request for repayment, but as a disclaimer. It stated, in unequivocal terms, that my past financial and labor contributions had been made under the implicit understanding of familial support and shared enjoyment. However, given the recent explicit establishment of usage fees, and the redefinition of that enjoyment as a transactional commodity, it was clear that the previous implicit agreement was now null and void. Therefore, to avoid any future misunderstandings or further financial liabilities on my part, I was formally notifying them that all previous contributions were now to be considered a gift, with no expectation of reimbursement or continued access. In essence, I was severing the financial ties that bound me to their property, particularly to the pool. The day I chose to deliver it was also a Sunday. I didn't go for dinner. Instead, I arrived mid-afternoon, just as the sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. My father answered the door, looking surprised. "Oh, hello, son. Come in, come in. Your mother is in the garden." I stepped inside, the familiar scent of lemon polish and expensive potpourri filling my nostrils. I could hear my mother's voice, bright and carrying, from the backyard. I walked past my father, who trailed behind me, a question forming on his lips. I didn't go to the garden. I walked directly into the living room, the room where so many of their pronouncements had been made. I placed the thick manila envelope on the polished mahogany coffee table, right in the center. "What's this?" my father asked, peering at it. I looked at him, then at the envelope. "It's a clarification. Regarding the pool. And our financial arrangements." Just then, my mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her gardening apron, a smile plastered on her face. "Arthur, who's at the door?" "Oh, it's you. Come to enjoy the sunshine? It's a perfect day for a dip." Her eyes flickered to the envelope, and the smile faltered for a microsecond. I turned to face her. "I'm not here for a swim, Mother. I'm here to finalize things." I gestured to the envelope. "That's a breakdown of all my contributions to the property over the years. Financially, and in terms of labor. Since you've decided usage now has a price, it's only right that we acknowledge the investments made in creating that asset." My mother's face went ashen. She took a hesitant step closer, her eyes wide. She picked up the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. She opened it, and the rustle of papers seemed to echo in the sudden, profound silence. She scanned the first few pages, her breathing becoming shallower. My father stood beside her, his own face a picture of bewilderment and dawning realization. What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's an accounting," I said, my voice calm and measured. "Given your new policy, I wanted to ensure there were no outstanding debts or expectations. My contributions have been accounted for. And as such, my right to access the property, particularly the pool, based on those past contributions, is now extinguished. I'm not asking for money back. I'm simply documenting the exchange. Consider it a mutual divestment." Her eyes darted from the papers to my face, searching for any sign of remorse, any hint that I was bluffing, that I was still the dutiful son who would back down. But there was nothing. Only a quiet, unshakable resolve. Her face contorted. The carefully constructed mask of sweetness crumbled, revealing a raw, panicked anger. You can't do this. This is our home." "It is," I agreed. "And I'm no longer contributing to its upkeep, nor do I expect to benefit from its amenities. The terms have changed. You've made that abundantly clear." She started to speak, to lash out, to unleash the familiar torrent of gouaille, and manipulation. But the sheer weight of the documentation, the undeniable evidence of my past generosity now being used as a shield, seemed to have paralyzed her. She looked from the papers to me, and then, her gaze fell upon my father, who was staring at the document with a growing sense of dismay. "Arthur," she choked out, her voice cracking. My father looked up, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, significant moment. There was no anger there, only a profound sadness, a quiet understanding of the forces at play. He didn't defend her. He didn't defend me. He simply stood there, a silent witness to the implosion. My mother finally dropped the envelope. Papers scattered across the Persian rug. She let out a strangled cry, a sound of pure, unadulterated frustration. She had always controlled the narrative, always dictated the terms. And now, the script had been rewritten, the power dynamic irrevocably shifted, not with a bang, but with the rustle of paper and the cold, hard logic of an accounting ledger. The aftermath was predictable. Frantic texts from my mother, demanding I come over to discuss this properly. Flying monkeys, aunts and cousins who'd always benefited from the pool parties, called, their voices laced with concern and thinly veiled accusations. "What's this about money, darling? Your mother is so upset." I deflected them all, politely but firmly, reiterating my position with the same measured tone. My father, caught in the crossfire, remained largely silent, a somber presence in their increasingly frantic attempts to regain control. Then came the real fallout. My mother, unable to bear the loss of her social centerpiece, her symbol of status, and her leverage, began a campaign of passive-aggressive gossip. But without my financial support, and with my meticulous documentation circulating quietly among certain family members, her narrative began to unravel. People started asking questions. They saw the pool, still beautiful, still maintained, but the story of their struggle to keep it afloat suddenly seemed less convincing. The whispers grew louder. The invitations to their parties, once coveted, started to dwindle. The shame, the social consequence of being exposed as financially manipulative and emotionally exploitative, began to take hold. The renovations to their backyard oasis weren't mine, not in the traditional sense. I didn't rip anything out, I didn't build anything new. My renovation was in the psychological landscape. I simply presented them with the unvarnished truth of their own actions, reflected back at them through the lens of their own transactional worldview. I changed the locks, metaphorically speaking, on my own emotional access to their drama. The satisfaction wasn't in their suffering, but in the quiet dismantling of their entitlement. The oasis, once a symbol of their supposed generosity, was now just a pool. And the price they were willing to pay for its upkeep, by their own admission, had become too high. They were left with their shimmering blue rectangle, a monument to their own carefully constructed illusion, now devoid of the emotional currency it once commanded. The silence that followed was, in its own way, profound. And for the first time in a long time it felt like peace.